English translation 919th contact Thursday, October 16th, 2025, 58 hours.
You are actually here, already. But welcome, and greetings, my friend. I could not sleep because someone phoned again at an early hour. And, wait, it is ringing again. You are barely here. I just put the phone down, and do not talk, because it is just telephone terror. Because someone is calling from abroad and they were told years ago that it was the middle of the night so they should not call again. Unfortunately, none of this helps. So do not bother if it rings again. I will just put the phone down and hang up without answering.
Greetings to you too, Edward, my friend, and now I am reassured, because I was beginning to think something unpleasant had happened.
Fortunately, not just this unpleasant terror. And since I know that you are already up at midnight, I just called out because there is nothing left to sleep anyway.
Then we can talk some things over in peace, because I think you have got all sorts to talk about again, because since I have been absent, things have apparently piled up, as Bermunda told me, consequently.
Yes, it has. It has. 3 or 4 days ago, Bermunda was there briefly. Unfortunately, I was only occupied because Michael was with me, so she knocked on the door outside Eva's office, which Michael heard, but I did not. So he told me, which is why I went out, and she told me in the corridor outside that she would be back about 30 minutes later, which was actually the case. And she explained to me what she and Jenna and Floina had found out the same day about the ceasefire and the hostage release of the Israel-Hamas war. In addition, I find that as Bermunda explained, that the Dis as well as Pendi.
He must not speak openly about this because, and strict silence must be maintained about this as well. It would be, moreover.
That is clear. The whole thing is more than criminal, if only. But the fact that this American dictator can claim that he has created peace in Palestine, and is also glorified by the ignorant peoples of Israel and Palestine, and the world, as an angel of peace or peacemaker, etc., that really beats the whole thing. And the fact that Israel is also holding hostages, thousands of them, is simply concealed, and they are simply not called hostages, but prisoners. Women as well as men. What is Bermunda said, they are nothing more than hostages, of which around 2,000 are to be released. I do not know whether this has already happened, because I only followed the news on TV, as far as the hostages being released by Hamas, and dictator Trump's loudmouth praise and talk, that there will now be lasting peace in the Middle East. Stupidly, half the world howls along and praises him to the skies, as a peacemaker, which he is not, because Bermunda told me that the ceasefire only came about by.
That is as Bermunda told you, but you must not let that be revealed. The whole thing is what do you say, it is to pay.
Yes, that is right. We use the term to pay, colloquially, to mean impertinence, cheekiness, and impudence, or impudence, and so on. However, a toupee is actually something for men, namely, an artificial tuft of hair that is worn on the head in case of hair loss.
I did not know that.
But now you do. But what to say about dictator Trump regarding his loudmouth speech, especially about the fact that a harmonious peace has now been created in the Middle East, for which he praises himself as a hero and peacemaker, and is also stupidly praised by fellow howlers. I know from what I have seen together with Bermunda, that this will not be the case, because, and that is absolutely certain, just as the evil treachery continues, which is equally prevalent among Israelis and Palestinians, and has already led to executions and privately carried out murder during the war, but this is being concealed. This is especially so, although the Israeli mass murderer knows this, but remains silent, because Palestinian traitors to their country, sometimes have families who are friendly to Israel, which often leads to family disputes and family murders, cooperate with Netanyahu or the Israelis and thus betray their own country to them, which is why the Israeli military find the Hamas underground buildings, and also the Hamas fighters in the hospitals, and so on. Unfortunately, this is the case because there are always traitors everywhere, as was the case in Switzerland during the last World War, and they were executed in so-called neutral Switzerland, and as also happened some time ago when a federal council took over sanctions from the EU dictatorship and imposed them on Russia, remaining completely unpunished, and making a mess of friendly relations as a result. Now that the American dictator Trump has had his fingers in the Middle East war for quite some time, we live Anyone interested can work out how many other people in America will slowly realize what game this power-obsessed Trump is actually playing. Many of his supporters who were well disposed towards him have now been able to recognize his dictatorship machinations and, together with Trump opponents, no longer want to put up with the whole of his dictatorship measures, which will consequently be expressed in just a few days. It will be 3 or 4. As I have seen together with Bermuda, millions of Trump opponents will take to the streets and demonstrate. It will then be.
But you know that you have to keep quiet about it. But one question, why do you never actually talk about the fact that the term Hebron, which goes back to which you have mentioned on various occasions and which, I think
differently, because even if the ancient term is identical to the German word with the same number of letters, and it would probably be too early to say what is effectively behind it. I think it would all be misunderstood, and that is why I do not think I will say anything about it. As soon as I said that about Abram, I was telephoned and threatened, and if I were to explain what the term Hebron really means, and that consequently, the huge area that is now called the Middle East, where the war of the mass murderer Netanyahu and Hamas is raging, is actually the cold.
I did not know that Tan never said anything about it either. So it is actually better if you keep quiet.
Yes, I know my little dots will be used when you dictate.
It really would not be good if it turned into. That then also led to hatred as a result of the misunderstanding and exactly the opposite of what was intended. Unfortunately, it resulted in.
Nocadimion would turn in his grave if he knew what happened to his teaching here on Earth, and what resulted from it, because the Earthlings took it all the wrong way and made exactly the opposite of what was actually the point of it all. However, when you dictate, I will remember to explain everything with Pug.
That is annoying. Cannot you stop that?
No, I do not know how. Besides, it is ringing in Ave's office over there, and in the whole ring system of the house. But do not get upset. The caller will get tired of it at some point.
You're calm. You did not even get upset.
Why, there is no point, and it would be bad for your nerves. The man will give up his phone calls. Just think.
There you go again.
Aha! There is obviously someone here from Switzerland. But at this time of night, hopefully nothing's happened. Yes, what is it? Well, but really only on pay, if you speak even halfway German, but I understand you. And that is why you are calling me at this time, because you could have done it during the day. Be on? I can, and will answer your questions, by saying that these traces were specially fabricated, just to prove that they really exist. However, there are no real land traces from Pleiadian blasting ships, because those that were made in 4 different places were only faked with the help of the Menara and Simiesa blasting ships. So they really were genuine blast ship land traces, but they were faked, because they were made specially. Our FIGO members knew that too, because they were told about it. As you say, the world is not coming to an end because of that, and besides, the crop circle pictures are something completely different from the specially prepared or faked landing traces with the Menara and Semiasa jet ships, because these crop circles of the UFOs probably have a specific purpose, which I do not know. As for your second question about the traces of acid on the cars, I can say nothing more about it than that they were human-like beings who excreted an acid through their skin and left various traces of acid on 2 cars that they touched several times. These creatures had long, thin arms and large hands with very long fingers, which were acidified on the bonnets and doors of 2 cars. We kept one of the bonnets when the cars were replaced, but somehow over the years it was unintentionally disposed of. Your last question about shooting wolves, as federal counselor Rusty wanted to do a long time ago, shows that the man is not suitable for his post, because he clearly has no idea what is behind it all, let alone why wolves form larger packs than they used to. He should think about the fact that there is a huge overpopulation on Earth, which is increasingly restricting the habitat of wild animals, which is consequently becoming less and less, with the result that all wild animals, as well as wild animals and birds, etc., are coming into ever closer contact with humans and losing their fear of them. However, this can also result in certain forest animals, such as wolves, becoming dangerous to humans, because wolves are predators that hunt prey, or defend themselves when they feel attacked or simply cornered, just as humans do when they feel attacked. And then there is the extremely important fact that, as a result of the almost 10 billion overpopulation of the Earth, many farmers, sheep farmers, and chicken breeders, as well as hobbyists in this field, keep huge numbers of cows, cattle, calves, sheep, and chickens, which spread out in the meadows, floodplains, fields and even forests, to such an extent that it is an irresistible incentive for wolves and their entire packs to kill and bite. They cannot resist the urge, because their nature is naturally designed for this, and humans encourage this without hesitation, in order to then punish the animals by shooting them for the evil they the humans have done themselves. So, if man prepares such a laid table for the predators, then he should not be surprised that these animals feel invited and take it. This in turn means that they can gorge themselves to the brim, and it promotes their immense reproduction, as a result of which the animals depending on their species multiply drastically, and grow into ever larger packs, just as man has done insanely and completely irresponsibly, and continues to do today in the same way, and is on the verge of a 10 billion overpopulation, because only about 400 million are still missing by then. That is millions and billions more than the false figures counted by the world population clock, which only shows 8.3 billion. So now, you know what it really is. Have you compris everything? Being. And if you want to vote again, please do so during the day, and not in the middle of the night. Goodbye. Yes, that is right. Humanity would have to be drastically reduced to just 500 million people, as the Pleiadians say, who have roughly the same size planet as the Earth, but only a few million more people than 500 million. They explain that this is the absolutely responsible number that ensures that all of nature's creation, that is to say all of nature and its fauna and flora, including humans as well as the planet, can live and exist without problems. For this, however, it is unconditionally necessary that true peace reigns among mankind, and that creation is respected, protected, and honored, without any predation or destruction taking place, or it being hunted in any other way. Bien, but please keep to it. Oui, merci. Bonne nuit.
For you to be called at this hour for the sake of such questions, I find that.
Do not be bothered by it, and do not get upset. You would better see this letter here. You should read it, and tell me whether I should really go into it and write some things openly here, because I think it has become necessary now, because questions are being asked about it. But the question is to what extent it would be smart for me to go into it in more detail, and at least make things clear as far as is responsible. You know yourself that saying too much does more harm than good. In this case, that people only inhale knowledge and believe, but no longer think for themselves, as is the case with believers who have fallen into the clutches of religions and sects. But please read this.
Apparently these 6 people are interested in this topic, as are probably many other Earthlings. So if you want, then you should really endeavor to answer, although I would be interested myself.
Sure you can, because I can explain this right now. Consequently, you can listen in. It is an important question that I actually want to answer in order to clarify what it is all about. When people mistakenly believe that they have memories of their past lives, although this is an unparalleled misconception, Safath has already explained to me how the facts of the matter arise, truthfully, and how Nakademion had already clarified and taught the whole thing in ancient times. Or his creation energies, naturally, as a human being, was transferred from the creation energy level, Arahat Atharsada, back into the material world in order to bring and spread the teaching of clarity among human beings, which has since been called the teaching of truth, teaching of creation, energy, teaching of life. This took place in the Ankar universe, or parallel universe of creation, nature around 9 billion years ago, in order to be disseminated in all 7 parallel universes of creation nature. But this is the first time that this has happened in a globally open manner, here on Earth. This first took place on this planet Earth several tens of thousands of years ago, and only in our parallel universe, and in the Sol system of our Milky Way or the galaxy of creation, nature, because that is how it was when everything began on this planet. Nowhere else in our cosmos has Nakademian's teaching been taught and disseminated, because the fact that it has been taught on our Earth for thousands of years and continues to be taught is due to chance, namely because around 25 million years ago, the ancient Aranaeans found a natural gateway from their anchor universe into our Darren universe, as they called it, and our creation nature, and then also found it to our planet. Naturally, this opened up the Darren universe, which they also call Darren creation, as well as the Dull Twin universe, to the ancient Arans, where the teaching was then spread. Unsuccessfully, it was spread on Earth only in part, and thus in fragments, as happened through the teachings of ancient heralds, but only a few millennia ago, although their teachings contained much material against the Nocadenian teachings, because falsehoods invented by Earth people were added to the old teachings of the ancient Arans. This was also the case with the manual, but to a much lesser extent, so that only now is the teaching being fully disseminated worldwide, through the use of electronics. And when I now speak of parallel universes or universes in general, then this should always, and without exception, be understood to mean their cosmos, because only in these do galaxies exist in which suns and solar systems, star clusters or sun clusters, planets and planetary systems, asteroids and asteroid rings, as well as space dust and space creatures, etc., exist. Unfortunately, since time immemorial, the various evolved human beings as well as the human-like fish, human-like in so-called Homo sapiens, have never understood what Nocadenians' teachings taught, just as this is not understood today by the clever and smart so-called Homo sapiens, who really want to be clever but are dumber and more stupid than bean straw. They have still not become more clever in their stupidity, and still crave strife, revenge, violence, war, murder and destruction, etc., in order to satisfy and boast themselves. Only a really extremely small minority, striving for true peace, along with another minority, seeking only partial peace, is to be mentioned, for whom any military is an abomination, because such a military only ever drills people in order to murder others and destroy what has been achieved by people. This is how war material is bought and hoarded for immense sums of money, which serves nothing other than to prepare for war in order to satisfy the lust for war in the depraved character of all those who lust for murder, manslaughter, and destruction. This is the majority of earthly humanity that considers all warmongering to be necessary, and then calls it defense when war actually breaks out. However, this is only claimed until it is their own turn, and they have to breathe their last, because then perhaps the moment of realization comes that war is pointless and wrong, if there is still enough time for this thought before it bites the dust and it gets dull. And the worst thing is that in most countries in the world, military service is subject to a state-imposed obligation, which conscripts can hardly or not at all avoid in the case of compulsory military service, and often even refusal is punished with the death penalty, or in mild cases with a prison sentence. But the people do not defend themselves against this, because there are only very few people, just a tiny minority, of another minority, who want to build effective and lasting peace, and this only peacefully, with a clear mind, with logic and reason, but never with the military, murder drills, weapons, and war, etc. Unfortunately, however, there are countless people who misunderstand killing in a war is right, good, and of the right, and want to do military service, as I learned when I enlisted in the French Foreign Legion. To fathom the thoughts and emotions of the legionnaires, I succeeded and survived the drill well, but then, when I was promised that I would be seriously deployed, I preferred the Finchstroke, whereby I ran away and ended up in Morocco, which had become independent of France and Spain, and then back in Europe in Switzerland. Then in Hinwil, when I was called up to take part in a military tour, as a result of an order, I was told that the army could use people who had legionary experience. Well, as you know, I stubbornly refused to join the army because I have always been against killing, war, and everything connected with it. Together with your grandfather Zaphath, I had seen and experienced more than enough when he flew me to various theaters of war in his blasting ship, and I well enough about that.
Yes, I understand. You once said it got into your bones.
It did, but let us not talk about that. Where did I get stuck? It was probably that I was talking about the cosmos-wide deposition of thought energies. All of the thoughts are based as permanent memories, cosmos-wide, in deposited energies, which are from thoughts and impulses, etc., of persons, people, and beings who have long since died, and who were thought days, weeks, months, years, decades, or even millennia ago. Those people who are able to catch the cosmos-wide stored former thoughts and other impulses are able to do so because they reach the level of consciousness of those deceased persons or beings who have deposited the energies of their thoughts, feelings, and impulses, etc., and who effectively remain cosmos-wide for all time and never pass away. In this way, the memory absorption does not effectively spread, however, through spiritualism in the form of the alleged memories of the former life, etc. But the overall evolution of man in the entire cosmos also takes place in this way. Not in the universe, which consists of 3 gigantic energy belts, the cosmos belt, as well as 3 other energy belts, so that the cosmos is only just 1/7 part of the universe. In addition, the entire 7-part universe is also only 1/7 part of creation, which contains 7 universes, each of which has different dimensions and is interwoven into each other in a dimensionally unfamiliar way, and is therefore not, and never tangent to each other. The 7 universes of creation are therefore its own, so they are not foreign universes, because foreign universes belong to another creation, in 7 dimensions, and in a different way, unless they are twin creations, or triplet creations, etc., just as the energies of the thoughts and impulses, etc., of humans and all beings capable of conscious development are deposited cosmos-wide for all eternity. Humans capable of absolute conscious evolution and other beings absorb the energy vibrations stored cosmos-wide for an endless duration, as seen by us, whereby everything effectively develops cosmos-wide endlessly in this way. And there is no doubt that everything is constantly evolving and changing, and consequently everything evolves, from the simplest microbe to the blade of grass, to man, and even to the entire cosmos, which is constantly, and therefore incessantly, renewing itself over the course of 49 billion years. This is how everything and everyone changes over the course of time and evolves ever higher, such as man, for example, who briefly explained from a simple impulse became a tiny microbe, then a living being which ultimately developed into man. This evolves more and more, in order to one day become part of creation itself, as pure energy, but only in order to continue to evolve with it in endless duration and further, in endless duration in order to enter the absolute being as the final goal via 6 further higher absolute forms, in order to dwell in this, for all endless duration. The level Araha, Atharsata, has released this by teaching Nocademian, who has become human again, to teach this knowledge to consciously evolving human beings and entities. Human beings and entities of all kinds who are able to evolve consciously perceive the cosmo-wide stored impulses of earlier human beings and entities through their creative life energy, and these are passed on to the physical subconscious in an impulse-activating way. This receives the impulses, and the consciousness begins to work with them in an evolutionary way, whereby evolution or development progresses, and thus the knowledge of man becomes ever more extensive and advanced. In this way, evolution progresses throughout the cosmos in endless duration, on all worlds among humans and other beings who are capable of conscious thinking and thus of conscious evolution, spreading through the endless cosmos-wide deposits of the energies of thoughts and impulses, etc., of humans and beings who are capable of conscious thinking, and thus of conscious evolution, of people and beings who are capable of conscious thought and impulses, and send out evolutionary energies, which are powerfully stored cosmos-wide for all time and are in turn caught and further developed cosmos-wide by people, or other consciously evolving beings, so that evolution never stands still, but continues endlessly, cosmos-wide. This is how evolution spreads. Endless evolutionary energies are sent out cosmos-wide by humans and other consciously evolving beings of all genus and species and are picked up by other humans and beings via the unconscious of a life energy of creation, registered, and impulsively passed on to the physical subconscious, and further into the conscious, whereby evolution is then continued working with it. If we now take the Earth and the people of the Earth as a starting point, the result is that more and more people are populating the planet, releasing enormous masses of energy through thoughts and impulses, etc., which are stored cosmos-wide. And this huge mass of humanity means that many people develop or evolve in the same way, and at the same time, in the same way and with the same interests, thereby releasing similar energies of their thoughts and impulses, etc., which are powerfully stored cosmos-wide, permeate everything, and simultaneously move through the entire cosmos, constantly releasing themselves. Consequently, in the course of human mental evolution, It also results that, in the entire cosmos, on all worlds and other entities that carry consciously evolving and knowledge-forming life, humans, human-like, and other beings capable of conscious evolution, more and more of their powerful energies, of thoughts and impulses, etc., are stored and spread, cosmos-wide for an endless duration. These powerful energies are absorbed by consciously evolving human beings, human equals, and other entities that have the same physical levels of consciousness or evolutionary stages in a completely synchronized manner and are further consciously processed through thoughts and impulses of many different kinds, thereby progressively producing further, highly evolutionary knowledge. As a result, already existing evolutionary states of humans, human-like beings, and other consciously evolving entities are further developed through their skills and knowledge. Through their conscious processing of all the impulses they have unconsciously absorbed from the energies of thoughts and other impulses, etc., that weave through the entire cosmos, they are constantly evolving further and further. As a result, these energies also affect humans, human-like beings, and beings of all species everywhere, who stand out from the great mass because they are able to absorb higher evolutionary energies, according to their mental evolution, so that they stand out recognizably from the general mass of normality, for example as inventors, highly educated, and geniuses, etc. Just as the development of the positive is progressing higher and higher in the entire cosmic realm, unfortunately, the negative also emerges in all types and ways, because the energies of all kinds of thoughts and impulses in the negative are also stored and spread cosmos-wide, just like everything of the positive. It goes without saying that the impulses of the negative are also spread throughout the cosmos, absorbed by humans, human equals, and other consciously active beings, and used in a negative way, such as for murder and manslaughter, hatred, revenge and retaliation, war and terror, torture, oppression, enslavement, violence, and all other kinds of negative things. And this is unfortunately immeasurably more widespread throughout the cosmos, among humans, human equals, and beings who indulge in not controlling their thoughts and other impulses, as well as their negative behavior and uncontrolled negativity, than anything positive, and all its immeasurable values. And the fact that this is actually the case throughout the entire cosmos is denied by all know-it-alls and other self-important people of humanity, as well as all human equals and beings on Earth, all worlds, etc., of the entire cosmos, as a result of their painful ignorance. This, as taught by the herald Nocodemion, who was first summoned from the plane Arhat Afarsata, back to the realm of all that is material, in order to instruct human beings, human equals, and all beings endowed with conscious awareness, so that they may learn to follow the order of all-compassing creation, which is all-compassing existence, nature. This, however, is neither a god nor any other divinity or holiness, which are nothing other than human creations of delusion and fantasy, created by humans, human equals, and beings who, due to their ability and knowledge, considered themselves to be higher, and thus elevated themselves as gods, goddesses, and saints. This happened in the same way as all kinds and types of know-it-alls, religionists and scientists do today, to whom the actual reality and truth is unknown, and who only indulge in their illusory thinking, illusory knowledge, and delusions of grandeur, and insult the truth as a lie. However, this is not limited to the people of Earth alone, for the same applies equally throughout the cosmos, to all humanities, human equals, and beings of all species and genera, as was taught ages ago by the herald Nocodemion, in the Anchor universe, who was summoned from the plane Arahat, Athersata, into the realm of the material, to teach as a herald. In the same way that all this takes place cosmos-wide with regard to what is explained, the impulses falsely recorded as memories from this or a previous life are also conceived, although they are not such memories, but merely thoughts and impulses, etc., of long-dead people. These may have had their thoughts and impulses days or years, decades, centuries, or even millennia before, but they are then picked up by believers in rebirth or reincarnation and falsely believed to be experiences, etc., from previous lives. Self-taught taught regarding the delusion of people about rebirth or reincarnation, that it is all based on a cosmos-wide heresy, among beings who have evolutionary mental faculties. In this regard, Svath taught that according to the herald Nocodemion, was ordered to return from the developmental level Adahat, Ater Sata, to the world of the vitality of material life, in order to instruct the life forms with a conscious, and thus evolutionary consciousness, regarding all factors of the duration of evolution. But out of misunderstanding, by the poor thinking of the beings, who should be judged as capable of thinking, in order to collect, analyze, and evaluate information, and thus to think clearly and logically, and to apply and evaluate valuable mental processes, so that they should thereby come into full possession of their mental powers of judgment, understanding, and reason. By learning to analyze and evaluate everything correctly, they failed and created the delusion of belief in rebirth or reincarnation. The cosmic rebirth, the cosmic reincarnation. Reincarnation, which was spread throughout the cosmos, and continues to this day, even among travelers from afar, among whom the teachings of Nocademion have not yet found their way, and who indulge in false heresies regarding the origin of the structure of creation, and the reality and effective truth of the energies and forces of everything that exists. However, rebirth, or reincarnation, is not and never will be possible in the realm of the entire created existence of all that exists, and consequently, even after death, a memory of the previous life or even many memories of other several past lives are not possible. Only physical inheritances, of all kinds and forms, are possible, but these are effectively only physically conditioned, which refers on the one hand to the physical, and therefore also to the organic, as well as to the content and the nature of the same. When a person dies, the energy of creation that vitalizes him escapes from his body, but it remains in it for a short time after death, although it can no longer be detected by equipment. This creation energy permeates the body in a delicate way during life, but is connected to the evolutionary creation life energy, which contains the creation energetic consciousness and its unconscious, whereby the physical consciousness and its subconscious are activated. With the physical consciousness, the human being thinks and learns, and the resulting positive knowledge, and absolutely only the positive knowledge, is continuously passed on impulsively to the creation energetic unconscious, which stores everything, and which is then processed when the two energy forms enter the area of the designated creation energy level after death, in which the processing or working up of the stored positive knowledge takes place. Note: see Creation Energy Theory. Teaching Letter 123. If the being is consciously capable of evolution, through its world of thoughts, then every thought generates an energy that is stored in the entire cosmos for all time, and is therefore preserved for all time, eternity. This energy encompasses everything that has been lived, experienced, and learned, etc., which is stored for all time in the entire cosmos. Yes, in the course of the evolution of consciousness, a person develops to such an extent that he reaches the level of consciousness energy of that person who has stored his knowledge, his life circumstances, his life data, and everything of his life in general as a whole, through thought energies. Then these are contained cosmos-wide, and for all time, which can then be called up by any person or entity who has reached the level of consciousness energy of that person whose energies have been stored cosmos-wide. People who believe in rebirth or reincarnation then erroneously interpret such retrievals as memories of their own or several previous lives, although these old deposits relate to those of other people who lived days, months, years, decades, or even centuries ago. Such memories can be so precisely accurate that they can even be verified, for example that places or events correspond very precisely with all the memories, or even with effectively lived persons, whereby it is then all the more falsely assumed that they are recollections of the previous life, or lives of the person concerned, who was of the opinion that he or she remembers one or more of his or her own previous lives.
This is all still a mystery to Earth people, as well as regarding the creation energy and creation life energy that.
Yes, I know. I still have a lot to say about this, because your grandfather's Thoth taught me a lot about it. However, I have to repeat that when a person dies, the vitalizing energy of creation escapes, but it remains in the organs for a short time after death, although it can no longer be detected by equipment, etc. This allows the person to have organs that can be used for other purposes. This enables people to carry out organ transplants and to continue living with other people's organs.
But with that you will
never get to the end. I know, but look here, I have received an interesting email from the USA. What do you think? Salome Billy. Thank you very much for your reply.
Salami Billy, thank you very much for your reply. Since Thoth and the Pleiadian can appear to the humans on Earth anytime and anywhere, their appearance in beamships must be a courtesy and responsibility to the humans on Earth to let the witnesses know in all candor that they are not from Earth to support the mission. As for witnesses, 3 elders was recently interviewed and spoke about a local dairy farmer she interviewed during the original investigation. He said he had taken photos of ships over Hintishmadruti, but his wife did not want him to share them with anyone for fear they would make fun of them. This was in the late 70s when the subject of UFOs was still a big taboo, but I wonder if these photos ever came to light. I know you are not interested in UFOs, but I wanted to share this with you in case you know this dairy farmer, and thus have one less hostile neighbor. The relevant part of the interview with Brit can be viewed here, but only in English. www.youtube.com. Kind regards, Matthew.
Interesting, so residents of Shmadruti did observe our jet ships when Simise, Pleja, and Ta were still often moving over the center in Shmadruti as well as in the immediate and lighter surroundings with their jet ships.
Yes, that was indeed the case. Old Mrs. Postfur watched all 3 of them once, as they hovered over the center Semyasa, Pata, and Pleja, as they confirmed to me when I asked them about it. Mrs. Fur, however, remained silent, and explained that she was not allowed to say anything about it, otherwise she would be declared insane. Walter Balmer from Sitzburg also observed your jet ships several times, and even waited to take photos of them until he actually succeeded and was able to take night shots when Pataha flew in. He gave me the photos which were then reproduced in a contact report. 2 people from Shmadruti also got in touch who had observed Pleiadian jet ships, but they did not give their names, and explained that they were not allowed to do so because otherwise they would be discredited in Shmadruti, and they could not afford that. Mr. Banniger from FKFA also contacted us, from over on the mountain, saying that he had seen your blasting ships twice, namely that they had flown low over the FAK site, and then over to our center, and apparently landed here. Photos of your jet ships were also taken several times by visitors from America, Japan, and Canada. But I never received any photos from them, and never heard anything from them again. The best thing was that Mr. Meyer from the Chelchek and Mr. Chumi, who introduced himself to me as the mayor, and who both came here to the center several times, twice, together with Mr. Meyer from the canton, who was generally only called Bully Mayor, and who together organized terror here, and wanted to drive us out of Hintishmadruti with curses and very nasty threats, suddenly turned their glove. When all 3 of them came over and started harassing me, Simyase whizzed low over us with her jet ship and landed in the Menara landing below, which we could still see clearly from the center, because I had not planted any trees that obscure the view there today. Without a word, I ran down to where Semyasa had landed, was lifted into the jet ship by her, whereupon she flew off with me, and we landed again after about 1 or 2 minutes. Semyasa only did this maneuver because she hoped that the 3 gentlemen would change their minds for the better. That was indeed the case, because all 3 of them, who were standing nailed to the car park in front of the coach house, stuttered at me and said, when I got back to them, that they should not talk to anyone about what had happened. They would be declared insane and taken to a lunatic asylum. They obviously kept quiet about it, I think including Mr. Shumi. He appeared several more times, but the other 2 did not, and so I was no longer harassed by them. This Mr. Shumi, who introduced himself to me as the mayor, said that I should do and organize everything as I saw fit, in the completely dilapidated Hintishmadruti, and with regard to all the equally dilapidated and disfigured grounds around it, as well as the forest and the public waters into which the toilet sewage and the kitchen drainage had been channeled for 16 years, and into which everything drained as I saw fit. I was also supposed to do the necessary building work on the house, the shed and the small buildings around it, without trying to get any authorization from the municipal administration, because I would never get it, because the municipal administration and the cantonal administration wanted us to disappear from Hintishmadruti by any means possible. Nevertheless, I tried once. I wanted to obtain a building permit, but this was actually refused. The kicker was that I had to go to the local council and was called antisocial, and threatened that I would have to stop the work in Hinterschmidt-Ruti, because the law would not allow it. But when I intervened and brought up the fact that the buildings, the land, the forest, and the clear-cutting were completely derelict, I was only told spitefully that we should move away and move somewhere else. Before we arrived at Hinterschmidt-Ruti, the local authority did nothing to stop the complete neglect and the clear-cutting of the forest, the discharge of toilet slurry into the public watercourse, and the destruction of the land, etc. And now that the Hinterschmidt-Ruti has been renovated, everything has been tidied up, the site is well planted all round, and the site and the forest have been reforested and put back in order. It seems that the devil is about to start all over again. There were 8 people, 2 policemen and 6 members of the municipal administration, who altogether did not understand anything about the whole thing, and let us run into punishments and regulations that are against everything that corresponds to a proper order and its preservation of nature. This is exactly what happens when a federal councillor, who is ignorant of nature, wants to shoot wolves and exterminate beavers, understands nothing at all about the necessary diversity of species and biodiversity, and would rather have motorways, sports grounds, and airfields built for billions of Swiss francs. Yet fools like this are elected as federal councillors in Switzerland, highly acclaimed and rewarded with an annual salary of almost 500,000 Swiss francs, in addition to all the additional payments they receive. This raises the question of where the Swiss people actually think, and why they simply allow such things to happen indifferently and irresponsibly, and why the federal council is allowed to choose its own calves, which is absolutely not in keeping with democracy. This, as well as the fact that really good federal councillors who work for the good of the people are not ousted and voted out of office.
I am aware of this from the writings of Ta, Vermunda, Farina, and Injana, as well as from my own experience, and I would like to say that various laws, ordinances, and regulations, etc. issued by the authorities of your homeland are depriving citizens of their independence. Clearly aware of this fact, I can empathetically understand your harsh statements, because a great deal of the rules, prohibitions, directives, regulations, and laws, etc. laid down by the authorities in your home country, as well as in other countries, do not correspond to a regulation, but to an effective incapacitation, deprivation of freedom, and restriction of the entire female and male citizenship of each state. Compulsory military service is also an unparalleled injustice because it causes war and terror, as well as obliging people to murder and kill under orders and to destroy valuable human achievements. All this also leads to the destruction of flora and fauna, the destruction of nature, and the general deterioration of nature. Environmental pollution and blatant destruction of the environment and environmental poisoning are also caused by war, apart from what happens in this respect due to the mass overpopulation of humanity on Earth. It also causes natural disasters and true ecocide.
Yes, unfortunately that is the case. Natural disasters and ecocide are already rampant due to overpopulation, which is further fueled by wars. It was different in the very early days, when everything was still in order with nature. Because when I think about what I saw with your grandfather's Sath, when there was still a lake here. It was called Sonora by the dwarf people who lived over there on the mountain high above the naturist area, around 32,000 years ago. In some places, the shore was overgrown with large reeds and bamboo, which can still be seen today, because when I was digging in the cellar of the main house, remnants of reeds dating back thousands of years came to light, as they did near the coach house when we were making the path. One day the southern dam broke through, and the lake disappeared, and so we now live on its former shore. But now let us continue with what I started talking about. Now, the ecocide is spreading all the more through extinction, devastation, and destruction, as well as the worst destruction of nature, against which something is only done with big words but not in reality. And if you do something valuable and right on your own, you will be penalized for it, because the law and the primitively stupid regulations and ordinances are made by laymen and uninformed people from the authorities, who understand nothing about the matter in question, but nevertheless, prohibit everything that is done right, namely work that creates order and protects nature, and its fauna, and restores its natural habitat to its true living use. Fortunately, however, there are still people here and there who work for the various authorities, who have not adopted and do not advocate the idiotic paragraph riddling of the authorities, which has obviously been invented as laws, regulations, ordinances, etc., by self-important experts. However, the self-important, as well as the power-obsessed and non-self-thinking believers in the authorities and believers in stupid paragraphs, as stupid, and incapable of any reason and understanding, adopt and defend everything without hesitation. This, here, for example, is a righteous person from the local authority who is well disposed towards us and said to Jacobus that the more people there are, the more laws, rules, ordinances, and regulations are invented and unleashed on mankind. And this letter here, which I received 2 days ago, from as you can read here, I have only kept it to give you to read, but I will destroy it afterwards. It really testifies to the fact that quite normal and reasonably independent-minded people are not indoctrinated and dependent on idiotic paragraphs and laws, etc., even if they work for the authorities, like these people here. Whereby, of course, must not let on that is well disposed towards us from the Figu and me. But you can read for yourself what is written. Here you go.
Thank you. D belongs to the grouping of the local council as rights. Nelsia, you should not mention the name, because you would do nothing good for, and you would no longer receive any information about the members of, because would be forcibly excluded from the position of the local council, because would be accused of treason and distrust. Is, as is clearly written here, very well disposed towards you in the Figu Association. Yeah.
You are probably wondering because I never told you, nor did Florina and Injana, that we Florina and Jana and I were very careless once when the two of them picked me up. It was in the Biotope car park, where we did not pay attention or did not pay enough attention to the fact that there were walkers out and about, and who saw how I had just floated up and disappeared into the jet ship. And it simply vanished into thin air as it flew away, as later reported to me when telephoned. Said that it was a great honor, that was able to observe this, and now knew that everything was really as we were spreading it, and making no secret of it. Therefore is well disposed towards me, and the Figu as well as our work. It is just a pity that, and the two people who were still there on the hiking trail and saw everything remain silent and do not want to be declared crazy by their acquaintances, etc.
Florina and Injana did not tell me about it, but I will ask them about it. Besides, would it really be necessary for once that you say some more about what the authorities have done to you and apparently are still doing, because you recently told me that?
Yes, perhaps it is necessary at some point, but that regarding the fact that Florina and Injana and I will, that is not a bad thing, because the same thing or something similar happened several times at the beginning of the contacts, as well as incidents of a different kind, such as with Jacobus and Amata, with Olgi, Tendorit, Engelbert, Maria, Silvano, von Ludwiger, Marcel. Then with the government official from Germany, who then came to Glidu again and again, every year, but whom I told in confidence that he should endeavor to make sure that word got out in German government circles, that they should exercise strict and sensible restraint in politics in future, that they should not unreasonably take sides, and help when it came to illogically supporting warmongering, if war broke out in Eastern Europe. There would then be a danger that political partisanship and unreasonableness could lead to enmity with Russia, and a vicious war against Germany, which could then disappear from the map, and be defeated and dissolved. He said that even if he tried, he would fall on deaf ears, which is why it was probably pointless for him to try. That is just in passing, because I was talking about other people who had experiences in connection with our contacts, including Walter Balmer, Mr. Banninger from FKK and others, and finally, my ex and Methuselah. Although today they both deny everything, against their better judgment and spread their lies all over the world. But there is probably no point in talking about it. So it is wiser to continue talking about what I was talking about earlier. Ecocide has been rampant for decades, due to overpopulation alone, and, together with wars, revolutions, and terror of all kinds, is causing serious damage and destruction to many ecosystems. The idiotic and wrong human actions of stupid, unintelligent morons who are nothing more than criminals, as is the case with the federal councillor in Bern. How he could be elected as a federal councillor at all is just as much a mystery to me as how the traitor to the country could be elected, who betrayed Switzerland's neutrality and made a pig of it, thereby creating enmity by adopting sanctions imposed by the EU dictatorship and applying them against Russia, without the rest of the Federal Council intervening against this, and thereby preserving Switzerland's neutrality. Question: why not? Fee. Instead of doing something valuable, protective and preserving for nature and its fauna and flora, and thus also for the continued existence of mankind, would rather have motorways and sports grounds and other nonsense built, and wolves shot and beavers exterminated, etc., in particular, the deliberate and massive destruction of the entire creation, which is not a god but truly nature, and its fauna and flora, and thus everything that exists universally is covered. Ecocide has already achieved such far-reaching and lasting negative effects on the Earth and its inhabitants, as well as the entire fauna and flora. For example, through massive environmental pollution or deforestation, the idiotic ban on the introduction of new plants that thrive here as a result of climate change, non-invasive ones, but are fanatically banned and labeled as invasive, through eyes. The whole concept of the future is being discussed by laypeople, who mendaciously call themselves experts but have little or no knowledge within the framework of international law, in order to hold those responsible for far-reaching environmental damage accountable here and there. But to shape all life of the future, the planet, the fauna, and flora, and the entire ecosystem, much more is needed, and above all, a clear conscience, and not a big mouth. The truth is, however, that there are only a few honest people who are really doing something to preserve the world and all its flora and fauna, including humans, while the majority of big spenders are only enriching themselves through money, while they are indifferent and irresponsible towards everything, and are good-for-nothings who only do their job for the sake of the big tap. The essence of ecocide is the very serious destruction of the entire ecosystems of planet Earth by human idiotic, money-grabbing and wrong actions, which properly speaking also include the entire fauna and flora. In principle, offenses against this are crimes that should also be punished by the courts, as I experienced in Hintersmedruti, where the municipal authorities in Turbanfall and the responsible cantonal government did nothing at all when everything was rotting and being destroyed. But now, after around 50 years, when almost all the damage and destruction has been repaired and everything has been renovated and planted, they come and reside with laws, rules, regulations and ordinances, etc., and start the old traditional terror all over again. In my opinion, nothing at all is recognized of all that we have achieved in 50 years, and often worked day and night to get it right. Now the cantonal and communal authorities are recognizing what we have achieved and are talking the talk, even with the courts and the police. But in the past they did nothing to prevent the total dereliction of the buildings, the discharge of toilets into public waters for 16 years, the destruction of the area, the land, the forest, and the clear-cutting. But now that everything has become a paradise, as many hikers who pass by say, the authorities are coming and want to take up residence. And the truth is that we have also restored the willful massive destruction of nature in particular, through positive far-reaching and lasting best effects on nature and the entire fauna and flora. In particular, we also restored the bird life. There were only about 60 magpies without exception that had taken up residence on the Freihof-Platz in Schmidriti, as I was told several times, and about 90 blackbirds, and the wildlife through massive environmental protection measures, as well as through substantial reforestation and other planting, terrain restoration, etc. The concept for repairing extensive environmental damage cost a lot of money and sweat. And the cantonal and communal authorities are now thanking us for it, with court appearances and so on. Ingratitude is obviously the reward for our 50 years of hard work.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do about injustice on the part of the authorities, because unfortunately, the authorities always have the upper hand, even if they do not understand the whole thing, and do not care about what needs to be done for the sake of order and safety for people, nature, the land, the forest, etc., the bird life and wildlife. But the Turbanfall local authority has done nothing to achieve this. And now that we Figu ANS have finally, after some 50 years, painstakingly put everything in order, and everything is thriving here, they come here to take up residence, and say that other people are now in charge of the authority, and will ensure that order is maintained, meaning that what used to be common practice will not continue. But what was done by these new people at the authority? Namely nothing, because no one contacted us to suggest. For For example, that the sloping hillside be repaired and the earth bank pressing against the church path be removed, so that churchgoers could once again walk safely of the church in Sixburg. But the authorities did nothing about it, not for 50 years, not before and not now. But now that everything has been put in order, and the last of what was missing has been done, people who have neither a clue nor any real knowledge of the whole thing are coming here, and not exactly cleverly residing in paragraphs. And for finally telling the truth, I can imagine that I will be confronted with lies and denials and insulted in a nasty and unjust manner, and there may even be court proceedings because the truth should not be made public. After all, people do not like to hear the truth, and there will also be attempts to get out of it by quibbling over paragraphs that the duty was not fulfilled in any way. It can also be assumed that the old agitation against me and against the Figo Association is secretly continuing, because we are foreign fools here. Do not believe in the nonsense of a dear God, and non-believers are not tolerated up here on the mountain. In addition, people are perhaps still angry today that the Hinterschmiedruti and all of Mrs. Herzog's land was not sold to the canton, as she was expected to do, as she told me, but that she sold it to me because she was in debt to me. The whole thing also contributed to the fact that we were harmed, which caused damage and cost many thousands of francs. For example, by all the cars being badly scratched at night, and the car tires being punctured, and large stones being thrown onto the roof of the house with a large slingshot, and smashing it. We had to pay tens of thousands of francs for a completely new roof. In addition, I was accused of being self-important, saying that today they who had just appeared here were different and better members of the municipal council, when I said that the members of the authorities at that time, around 50 years ago, had done nothing at all to stop the whole ravaging of Hinterschmiedruti, the destruction of the meadows and the land, and also the fact that for 16 years, the runoff from all the toilet slurry and the kitchen drainage was channeled into the public watercourse via a ditch, meaning that the groundwater runoff from the mountain was constantly being contaminated. Overall, no action was taken, not even against the fact that most of the forest was cut down, which I had reforested at a cost of 85,000 francs. The same applies to the fact that the authorities did nothing when the slopes slipped in 3 different places, one of which I had filled in again last year, and began to plant. To ensure that everything could be done properly, I had to divert the water of the public watercourse for a few meters with a large pipe for a short time, exactly 4 days, so that we could consolidate the drainage properly and well, which was apparently observed by someone. I was told by someone that this was the new forester, because he wanted to make an impression on the authorities. Although I do not know whether this is true or not, but that does not really matter, because I do not really want to pass judgment on it, because my neutral attitude does not allow that, which resulted in 2 police officers and 6 members of the authorities, including young and completely inexperienced ones, who interfered with big words, turning up at the site and complaining. In the end, I had to go to the police in Turvenfall where a report was drawn up. The whole thing was then forwarded to an office of the cantonal administration in Zurich, which then issued me with a penalty order. This was after a cantonal official was here on the site and secretly took photos of the slipped slope, which I was finally able to have refilled after years and put everything back in order, together with our FIGU members, of course. We also fixed the fact that the eastern slope above the church path had slipped and caused a 3-meter deep hollow or depression to sink into the hillside, which also endangered the church path, as it would have been covered by the material of the hillside pressing down, and had it completely repaired by a specialist at a cost of several thousand francs. In order to be able to remove the threatening embankment from the slope and level everything out, he tried to level the slope about 6 meters from the forest, which belongs to our site, so that he could drive up and work on the embankment from above. There were no trees or bushes on the slope, just grassland, but we still made a stink. Unfortunately, this was not possible, so everything had to be done from the church path, which is now safe to walk on again, and churchgoers can go to church again. The local authority in Turbenfall did nothing about this either, but instead accused us of needing authorization from the authorities. I now have something that was sent to us from on 8 October 2025, at 1752. It is an attack that can probably only come from the African-American Jr. in America who is now supposed to live somewhere in the Caribbean or something, who is a delusional cult leader, liar and deceiver without equal, who integrates like-minded people of his sectarian lies, as well as false doctrines and false claims, as well as lie indoctrination into his cult, and spread slander about me and the Figu worldwide, via the internet. About 2 years ago he wanted to incorporate me and the Figu into his sect, against which we naturally vehemently defended ourselves, and wrote to him that we strictly and totally distance ourselves from him and his spinning beliefs and delusional fantasies, and want nothing to do with his morbidly stupid delusional fantasies in any way whatsoever. Since then, he has been working all around the internet with attacks and delusional lies, as well as malice and scent vindictiveness against me and the Figu. And this is apparently happening worldwide, and in such a way that he insults and accuses me and the Figu of everything and everyone by lying and cheating in the worst possible way. This, as well as the fact that we would allegedly attack people, institutions, associations, groups and organizations, etc., and make harsh accusations and allegations that we neither know, let alone that we have anything to do with them, or even maintain any contacts with them. Consequently, we have nothing whatsoever to do with them. But read here what this pathetic, hateful African American and his hate media against me and the Figu is serving up in the form of lies and deceit, even though we have never done or would never do anything of the kind. He is accusing us of lying and deceitfully. Neither I nor our association Figu, or any of our members, would act in the accused way, nor have we ever done so, because our principle is based on the fact that we respect every person, every religion, every organization, every association, as well as every company, every corporation, every group, and absolutely really let and respect every person live according to their nature, their views, as well as their beliefs, their behavior, and schemes, etc. I would never interfere with the opinions or beliefs of a person or group, etc., either myself or one of our association members. Not even if we as non-believers represent reality and truth and other things, and therefore keep our distance from any belief. Nevertheless, we respect, appreciate and honor every person, regardless of their beliefs and opinions, etc., just as we make no distinction as to what race and skin color they belong to, what education they have, and whether they are rich or poor, etc. The fact is that we do not, and have never, advertised our organization Figu, and have never encouraged anyone to be sympathetic to Figu, or to join or support it. So it is not important to us how and what a person is, what they represent, please, advocate and do, because for us a person is simply a person, and we value respect and treat them as such, even if they insult us, despise us, and tell lies about us, or have a bad or evil opinion of us. He then has to go to the market himself, and come to terms with himself, because it is up to each person to educate himself and make himself a real and honest person, who endeavors in every way to see and judge everything correctly. Only in this way can he become honest with himself, and avoid insulting, tormenting, harassing, and otherwise harming others. We do not do this, so we do not interfere in other people's affairs, nor do we interfere in their beliefs in any way, nor do we physically attack anyone, just as we have never harassed or insulted anyone in any other way. Basically, all of us at Figu are in favor of peace, correctness, nonviolence and decency, etc., and therefore against any kind of fascism. As I have already mentioned in one of our conversations, when something was said about Antifa, well, the term anti-fast actually means anti-fascist in abbreviated form, whereby self-thinking people who are consistently, according to their own self-image, against all neo-Nazism, and thus against all forms of Nazi thinking, as well as Nazi behavior, as well as strictly against anti-Semitism, extreme right-wing ideologies, racism, as well as white supremacy, xenophobia, Volkish nationalism, right-wing historical revisionism, fascism, and against authoritarianism. The self-thinking and behavior of Figu members is also related to this, but this is even more extensive in terms of the rejection of false forms of government and their repertoire than among the organized actual Antifa supporters. So, everything that corresponds to and can be named as the following is included: dictatorship, rulership, and slavery, patriarchy, ochlocracy, oligarchy, tyranny, monocracy, lobbyocracy, critarchy, hierocracy, globocracy, exarchy, sadism, epistocracy, ecclesiarchy, oppression, halographing, domestic violence, as well as violence, despotism, autocracy, genital mutilation, cyber violence, extremist politics, bureaucracy, psychological violence, terror, hierarchy, coercion and war, stifling of freedom, minarchy, androcracy, anarchy, kleptocracy, kakistocracy, etc. Unfortunately, however, someone has obviously completely misunderstood what I have said, because clearly too little thought has been given to what I have said, which is why I think I have a few things to explain it in. Anti-fascism is the term for the opposite of fascism, and nonviolent resistance to fascism, and similar political forces. Unfortunately, anti-fascism is often pursued through violence, which is wrong, and not the point of the matter, and is therefore misunderstood, because anti-fascism also means non-violence, which means taking action against fascism in a peaceful manner, which means that understanding and reason and peace, and therefore the peaceful and enlightening word, are accordingly in the foreground. So if Antifa behaved in the opposite way, and acted violently, as is said or claimed, I do not know what the truth is in this regard, then that is absolutely wrong, because true anti-fascism means that no violence of any kind should be associated with it. So what I clearly wrote about Antifa was obviously completely misunderstood, that we are against any kind of fascism, which is a really evil system of rule or principle of state rule that is built on a very evil, organized use of power and violence, like the dictatorship that is now being exercised by Trump in America, but which his supporters of both sexes who are obviously struck by stupidity do not recognize. Fascism is often associated with the death penalty, and with opponents simply being secretly liquidated and thus eliminated. Fascism is also a hardline nationalist, anti-democratic, and radical right-wing attitude, whereby individual people, but especially movements, groups and ideologies are rampant and active in this way, based on an ultra-nationalist and organized anti-liberal state system that rejects and even combats all forms of democracy. As a result, fascism is geared towards glorifying the regenerative power of violence and racial superiority, unfortunately also leading to evil false doctrines of ethnic persecution and imperialist expansion and genocide, of which the mass murderer Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel is an example, as Adolf Hitler proved with his totalitarian form of rule and the Holocaust. Fascism is actually an attitude of a misguided person who, as in the last World War, advocated a National Socialist attitude, whereby a person today who indulges in fascism has a very bad attitude of radicalism, anti-Semitism, racism, as well as ultranationalism, social Darwinist, anti-communist, anti-democratic, and anti-pluralist ideology, and the worst violence. Well, it seems that what I said has perhaps been realized and correctly understood by now, which would be desirable. Just as it would be right to first read everything properly, and think about it intensively, and understand everything correctly before misinterpreting something, and therefore even insulting and lying. But now to the lies and slander that African Americans in the USA have leveled against me and the FIGU, and that denigrate us. The fact that we got to know this began when Bernadette received the following email.
Salome Bernadette. I am contacting you because I have been thinking about the troublesome drama regarding the slander and accusations. The case became known in Austria that also involved insults and hatred etc. on the internet, and this case is still ongoing. In this particular case, all the perpetrators who made unfair comments about Emma Bonmina on social networks have been, or are being investigated. I thought it might be an option to consider something like this. Perhaps there is a litigation funder who would look at our case. I think it cannot be that lies and crazy allegations are simply made on the net that are directed against Billy, the FIGU in general, and even against certain individual FIGU members linked below. So this is really disgusting to me. I understand that Billy does not want to defend himself against this. But if individual FIGU members are being framed as criminal elements, we should not just take it lying down if there is a way to counter the insanity through the courts. After searching for scribblings, I came across 2 different pages yesterday, one of which has a notice at the bottom, dangersoftbillymeyercultists.com/public call to action. If you have been harmed by Billy Meyer, MH, FIGU, or any of their affiliates, submit your story anonymously. We are gathering an international class action legal bundle and have already won several early battles. You will be protected. Greetings. Is.
Bernadette then replied as follows. Reply to S, dated 12.10. 25.
Salami S. I apologize for only replying to you now. We have had a problem with our mail server since Thursday morning, which could only be resolved yesterday evening. But now everything is working fine again. We know who's behind this website, and the matter is in good hands. We ourselves do not want to and cannot get involved in a legal dispute with the owner of the website because we have to assume that, for various obvious reasons, our rights would be disregarded and, in the worst case, the owner would be supported. By not reacting, we are giving the person the lie anyway, and we do not assume that they have already been able to recruit people for a class action. It is certainly nothing but hot air, and not worth mentioning. Of course, such actions are repugnant, but in our experience the least damage is done if we simply keep quiet, because then the matter simply dissolves due to a lack of response from our side. Apart from that, we have not the slightest reason to take the unfounded accusations and allegations personally, because we have done nothing wrong. Best regards, also from Billy and Salami Bernadette.
As for the unfounded, malicious attacks and accusations of lies by the African American in America, who is run off somewhere in the Caribbean or elsewhere, whom we had to forbid contact with us, because his lies and truth-mirroring as well as esoteric and crazy delusional fantasies were completely unrealistic, and also directed against us, has now found its continuation in the following, whereby he tries to defame me and the FIGU Association worldwide with lies and deceit.
Translation from DeepL. Com, a documented pattern of abuse, harassment, and criminal malice by the cult of Billy Meyer and FIGU followers. Overview Report. Worrying findings on the Billy Meyer case and the FIGU group. The Cult of Fiction. How Billy Meyer's FIGU movement turned faith into extremist harassment. The FIGU cult and the public exposure of J. Moore's future off, redacted host evasion, unlawful retaliation, and digital misconduct. The litigation against MH exposing the Billy Meyer FIGU cult and its criminal apologists orchestrating illegal attacks. A case study where fictitious beliefs cross criminal and legal boundaries, a documented pattern of abuse. Harassment and criminal malice by the Billy Meyer cult and FIGU followers public report on legal and ethical risks legal notice. This document is a legal evidence gathering and public safety warning designed to expose the malicious criminal activities of the group FIGU Free Interest Group for Fringe and Humanities, its founder Eduard Billy Meyer and associated agents operating under pseudonyms or organized cult fronts. All statements presented here are supported by time-stamped documents, email records, registration logs, and screenshots submitted in legal complaints to relevant international authorities, hosting providers, and ICANN registrars. This report has been reviewed for compliance with the GDPR, U.S. cyberbullying laws, and international defamation law. This is not a case of retaliation or defamation. It is about recording evidence of abuse in the real world. Summary of offenses by FIGU and its propagandists: trademark infringement ongoing, repeated use of trademark names such as redacted and redacted without consent on partner websites. Manipulation of search engines by embedding trademark protected names in URL paths and meta tags. Attempts to disguise use by removing visible names while keeping them in backend comment threads and meta descriptions. Criminal libel and defamation. Public articles accuse the target redacted of being a cult leader, groomer, drug addict, and mentally ill person. These allegations are made without a single police report, court case, or judicial finding. They are therefore completely fabricated and punishable under international defamation law, as they are all based on Billy Meyer's fictional narrative about non-existent aliens called Pleuron. Targeted harassment and cyberstalking. Use of websites posing as other people, for example, redacted, ESA-scam. Com, to spread lies, distort reality, and mock. Coordinated comments from cult followers referring to private personal details and photos and attacking family members. Publication of screenshots from private conversations and their dissemination through email campaigns. Violation of hosting terms and conditions confirmed. Hosting platforms such as Ionos, Google Sites, and others have been officially notified and have started enforcing measures. Domains still under investigation have been referred to legal counsel in Switzerland, the US, and EU regulators. Defense tactics in bad faith. A known propagandist for FIGU recently sent an email to Ionos claiming that their attacks were merely free speech while disguising the fact that they continued to leave defamatory content visible in comment sections and metadata. Attempts to shift blame to the victim by making trumped-up allegations of threats without any police reports or complaints verified by the host. Recent legal successes documented. Domain deletion, identity fraud and defamation websites successfully removed after legal escalation. Censorship enforced. Cult propagandist forced to remove names from articles after filing trademark infringement claims. Host intervention. The legal departments of major hosts have requested formal proof of registration from the rightful owner to begin enforcement. Pending proceedings and warnings. Domain deletion, identity fraud and defamation websites successfully removed following legal action. Censorship enforced. Cult propagandist forced to remove names from articles after filing trademark infringement claims. Host intervention. Legal departments of major hosts have requested formal proof of registration from the rightful owner to begin enforcement. Pending actions and warnings. Future off redacted and FIGU. Org are next in line for legal action. Future off redacted has been suspended, FIGU. Org is under criminal investigation by several international and local agencies. Continued publication of defamatory material or disclosure of personal identities will be prosecuted under both criminal and civil law. International lawsuits are being prepared. All data is archived in accordance with GDPR and ICANN requirements. Ethical statement. This is not an ideological war. It is a legal and spiritual reclamation from a cult that has harmed hundreds of people and refuses to take responsibility. This is not a personal vendetta, but a legitimate exposure and documented retaliation. The so-called contactee Billy Meyer has never proven a single allegation in court. Instead, he has built a fantasy cult that leads its followers to reject reality, attack dissenters, and destroy those who question his fraud. Public call to action. If you have been victimized by Billy Meyer, MH, FIGU, or any of their affiliates, submit your story anonymously. We are currently putting together an international class action lawsuit and have already had several initial successes. You will be protected. Original text: a documented pattern of abuse, harassment, and criminal malice by the cult of Billy Meyer and FIGU affiliates. Overview report. Concerning findings regarding the Billy Meyer case and the FIGU group, the cult of fiction. How Billy Meyer's FIGU movement transformed belief into extremist harassment, the FIGU cult and the public exposure of J. Moore's future of redacted host evasion, unlawful retaliation, and digital misconduct. The legal case against MH exposing Billy Meyer FIGU cult and their criminal apologists who orchestrate trait. Illegal attacks, a case study when fictional belief crosses criminal and legal boundaries, a documented pattern of abuse. And criminal malice by the cult of Billy Meyer and FIGU affiliates. Public legal and ethical exposure report. Legal notice. This document is a legal exhibit and public safety warning designed to expose the malicious criminal activities of the group known as FIGU Free Community of Interests in Fringe and Spiritual Sciences. Its founder Eduard Billy Meyer and affiliated agents acting under aliases or organized cult fronts. All statements presented here are supported by time-stamped documentation, email records, registrar logs, and screenshots submitted in legal complaints to relevant international authorities, hosting providers, and ICANN registrars. This report has been reviewed for compliance with the GDPR, U.S. anti-cyber harassment statutes, and international defamation law. This is not retaliation or slander. This is evidentiary record-keeping of real-world abuse. Summary of violations by FIGU and its propagandists. 1. Trademark infringement ongoing. All repeated use of protected names such as redacted and redacted without consent on affiliate sites. Search engine manipulation by embedding trademark names in URL paths and meta tags. Attempts to cloak usage by removing visible names while still leaving them in back-end comment threads and meta descriptions. 2. Criminal defamation and libel. All public articles accuse the target redacted of being a cult leader, groomer, drug abuser, and mentally unwell individual. These claims are made without a single police report, court case, or judicial finding, making them entirely fabricated and prosecutable under international defamation law. All based on Billy Meyer's fictional narrative of non-existent extraterrestrials called Pleeron. 3. Targeted harassment and cyberstalking. Use of impersonation websites. E.g. redacted ESA-scam. Com. to spread lies, distort reality, and mock. Coordinated comments from cult sympathizers referencing private personal details, photos, and attacking family members. Publishing screenshots from private conversations and spreading them through email campaigns. Thor. Violation of hosting terms confirmed. All hosting platforms such as Ionos, Google Sites, and others have been formally notified and began enforcing action. Domains still under investigation have been forwarded to legal counsel in Switzerland, the US, and the EU regulator boards. 5. Bad faith defense tactics. A known propagandist from FIGU recently emailed Ionos claiming that their attacks were merely free speech, while concealing that they still left defamatory content visible in comment sections and metadata. Attempts to reverse blame the victim by presenting fabricated allegations of threats, without any police reports or host-verified complaints. Recent legal wins documented: domain takedown, impersonation and slander websites successfully removed after legal escalation. Censorship forced. Cult propagandist was compelled to strip names from articles after trademark notices were filed. Host intervention. Legal departments of major hosts have requested formal proof of registration from the rightful owner to begin enforcement. Pending action and warnings. FutureOff redacted and FIGU. Org are next in line for legal challenge. FutureOff redacted has been null-routed, FIGU. Org under criminal investigation by multiple international and local parties. Continued publication of defamation or exposure of personal identity will be pursued under both criminal and civil frameworks. International suits are being prepared. All data is being archived in compliance with GDPR and ICANN requirements. Ethical declaration. This is not an ideological war. This is a legal and spiritual reclamation from a cult that has harmed hundreds and refused to accept accountability. No personal vendetta is being carried out, only lawful exposure and documented retribution. The so-called contactee Billy Meyer has never proven a single claim in a court of law. Instead, he has built a fantasy cult that grooms followers into rejecting reality, attacking dissenters, and attempting to erase those who challenge his fraud. Public call to action. If you have been harmed by Billy Meyer, FIGU, or any of their affiliates, submit your story anonymously. We are gathering an international class action legal bundle and have already won several early battles. You will be protected.
This is much more than just full of hate and completely insane, if I may respond with your words. This man is obviously not only sick as a result of his hatred and lacks his senses, because he not only accuses you of lying and cheating, but he even mendaciously questions our existence. There is nothing more to say about this nonsense because the whole thing is so full of stupidity, lies, obvious claims of deceitfulness, and, as I have already said, obvious hatred and fear. Thinking about it brings no value of any kind, just as no reason is evident in the whole.
I guess you are right, and I think that the man is not only sick in the head, but obviously really insane and also delusional, and is now sending this internet appeal around the world in great fear, in order to be able to maintain his cult as a result. That is what I suspect, in his insane behavior. It is not worth thinking about. I agree with you. But while we are on the subject of you Pleiaren, Ida asked me whether you ever had religion, which I answered in the negative. Because Nocademian's teaching, the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life was never based on faith, and therefore never on religion, but on the fact that man should always and only ever be a self-thinker, under all circumstances. His teaching has existed with you since time immemorial, and teaches that man should not believe in his life, but always think for himself, recognize reality and its truth from this, and never believe anything. As I already know from your grandfather Safa, this teaching was always respected and followed by the ancient Arans, in order to become, and be, a true human being, to maintain real peace, and to lead a way of life that corresponds in every way possible to what is right in creation, and therefore to everything that exists in nature, which is exactly what is called creation, and beside which nothing exists that is even one iota similar to it, or has the same effectiveness, or even the slightest ability with regard to its workings in any way.
What my grandfather taught you in this regard is true and correct, for since time immemorial and time immemorial we Irans or Pleiarans, as you call us here on earth, have had no faith, but only reality and its truth. Religions or sects of any kind have never existed among us, for even among our earliest ancestors before time immemorial, as you would say, the teachings of Nocademion were the guiding principle of existence and life. In respect, creation was knowingly honored and appreciated in all its existence and in its constant evolution and transformation, but never worshipped. Creation nature was also honored, respected, appreciated, and protected with the names power of creation and power of creation, as it still is and will remain today. But it is all in knowledge of creation nature, which we care for and would never harass, as earthly mankind unfortunately does in its ignorance and lack of conscience. And contrary to reality and truth, they do not recognize the real power of creation nature, but instead believingly place an imaginary god above it and beggingly worship this fantasy being, because they have been indoctrinated to believe that it is the creator and maker of the world and the universe and all life. This, however, corresponds to a malicious fairy tale of lies and deception without equal. However, if I now want to tell you a little more about our very distant ancestors, then it must be said that unfortunately 4 of our peoples mixed very early on with other peoples of foreign worlds of other systems outside our own and became like them through indoctrination, and ultimately also carried the whole malicious war behavior to Era, namely to the remnants of the 4 allied with the warlike foreigners from other systems of our cosmos a very long time ago. With them it was regulated in such a way that all persons capable of fighting, women and men, were obliged to integrate themselves into a fighting force at a young age and to participate in wars, contrary to everything that all our early ancestors rejected throughout the ages according to the Nocademion doctrine, and also stood up for and adhered to this rejection. The forced integration into a power for warfare means that murder is committed in the process, which the teachings of Nocademion call fundamental and clearly contrary to all rights of life. According to his teachings, murder of any kind is not only unjustified and unworthy of a true human being, but
It is legalized murder, even if the whole thing is obligatory and commanded, and thus killing is warlike. Killing people, no matter how, where, and why, is and remains murder, even if it is in a war.
you say it, and the teachings of Nocademion clearly teach this, which is also true today and in all future. On Earth, military means without exception that huge amounts of money are spent on armaments and everything is prepared for war, regardless of whether it is called a war of aggression or a war of defense. As a rule, it is war, and this consists mainly of murder and destruction, whereby insane warmongers, who, as you say, fill their trousers with cowardly fear, claim against all truth that war defends, maintains, or brings about peace. But that is an unparalleled lie, because war never really brings peace, but effectively only pseudo-peace, as you always say when we talk about such matters. People who suffer from constant subterranean thoughts of warlike material gathering are not the ones who.
You must mean arming up.
That is probably what you call it, but it requires such an explanatory fact that for as long as this armament is not fought mentally among people on Earth through understanding and reason and learn from it that peace cannot be created through strife, that's certainly not through fighting, threats and victory and etc. Real and true peace can only be achieved and maintained by having a necessary and corresponding honest attitude of peace and by talking and negotiating from person to person. However, if there is a war victory or a victory in a dispute or something similar, then the result is only an apparent peace or a sham peace, as you have correctly described this situation several times in our conversations.
That is so, and what dictator Trump has practiced in the Middle East is only a sham peace, if at all. The whole thing can be so because underground, deceitfully and secretly, plans are being forged to continue the whole evil. But America will also have its fingers in the dirty game. Just as the American dictator is also playing underhandedly with Ukraine and Zelensky, with Russia and Putin. Trump does not have a straight line. He is a man full of deceitfulness, threats, and fickleness, and he is a sham god for the stupid people who adhere to him and support him, whereby the crazy Trump supporters, in their inability to think, do not recognize how this dictator wants to bring the entire world under his dictatorship, which is designed for violence by hook or by crook. But while I am at it, I do not engage in politics, but I take the liberty of seeing, recognizing and reasonable judging the wrong policies of various states, and unfortunately, I see politicians at work, especially in Germany, who do more harm than good, and even evoke the danger that can drive Germany into roaring misery and even downfall. This is because certain pathologically stupid politicians are sowing enmity against their own country, because they interfere in the affairs of foreign states, and dealings that have absolutely nothing to do with Germany. The leader of the CDU parliamentary group, and the leader of the SPD parliamentary group in the Bundestag, are particularly ruthless, thoughtless, and stupidly impudent in this respect. Two people who, along with other like-minded people and along with the Chancellor, are causing such damage in their rabidly stupid and impudent behavior, their partisanship and their pathological hatred of Russia and dissidents from other parties, and are creating a danger that could have very serious consequences, which could possibly have such an impact on Germany that it...
You should not say that openly.
It is okay. I will keep that in mind when he dictate and put my dots. But it is true that here on Earth disagreement alone inevitably leads to discord and conflict and ultimately to violence, which in the end escalates into war and destruction. All kinds of politics and other kinds of so-called governance here on Earth, no matter where and in which country, will never bring peace. All those earthlings who arm for the military, who are simply in favor of it as a result of cowardly fear, ill-considered opinion, vindictiveness, lust for murder, or for whatever flimsy reason, are warmongers, and are responsible for the fact that the citizens of a state are drilled and trained to become murderers through compulsory military service, and compulsory military service, etc., sanctioned by the state, and who then also become effective when acts of war take place, or when any other state-ordered measures are ordered. This is the case, for example, when armed security operations against demonstrations, etc., are ordered by state decree, as decided by power-hungry rulers and the peoples indoctrinated by them, because compulsory conscription and absolute integration into combat armies, or the military, have been made law. Through all of this, the evil character formation of the majority of people, which is orientated towards murder, manslaughter, revenge and retaliation, cowardly fear, greed, vices, faith, greed, and many other evil and fearful things, is used to let it degenerate again and again, and endlessly. And to maintain it. There is absolutely no interest whatsoever in a person whose character is burdened with every conceivable evil and malice, becoming a truly positive, peaceful, and righteous person. It is truly only an absolute minority of another halfway good minority that really endeavors to cultivate and truly live a righteous and worthy as well as life-affirming character development. But all those misguided people who for whatever flimsy and primitive reasons and fear are always in favor of military armament and thus also war, are irresponsible warmongers. Such scumbags should stand on the front line themselves and stick their necks out when a war breaks out, because as culpable parties, it would be absolutely right that they should personally bear the consequences. The mere arming of weapons and other materials for a military, etc., with which war is then waged and murder and destruction is carried out causing misery and hardship, is irresponsibly criminal. But irresponsible and unscrupulous scumbags of every kind, who are all so mean, unrestrained, vindictive, ruthless, malicious, and unscrupulous, do not care. Nor do they care that they are usually cowards, and hide their fear behind their power, and all kinds of lying views, claims and out-of-fair evocations of enmity and danger, etc., which inevitably leads to a situation in which the people in power are not able to control themselves. This inevitably fosters fear among the people, that hostile-minded people from other states could invade with war, which means that taxpayers' money is gladly paid for this dishonest purpose. So everything is not geared towards true peace by the warmongering scumbags who are wildly arming weapons and war material for murderous armies with threats and lying claims, but towards discord, war, murder, ordered by the state and senseless destruction. Every people of every state should reject this, and say no to armament and war, and courageously refuse to accept any discord, any armament, and any war. Truly peaceful and courageous is every person who is peaceful and does not fight, but refuses and does not burden his conscience with murder and discord. As a rule, discord, armament, and wars are only planned by those who are greedy for power, in order to extend their power and their sphere of influence much further, for which the arms manufacturers and arms dealers of all kinds help them to organize everything for expensive money, and in their greed for money and profit. An effective fact that many innocent people, women, children, and men, have to pay for with their lives. The human being, living in every nation and in every state, is always only the plaything of the powerful, who sit in the authorities, the administration, and government. Therefore, let that person be wise, who does not allow himself to become a pawn in the hands of the powerful, and defends himself against the right, but always in a peaceful manner, and therefore never with violence and injustice. This requires wisdom, because this is the only way to avoid becoming a pawn in the hands of the powerful. Man must protect himself and his life, as well as cultivate his thoughts, feelings, and emotions in a correct and peaceful manner, through which he controls his self-education and forms his character, which in its essence should be far removed from all injustice, violence, unpeacefulness, and generally far removed from everything that is wrong, evil, false, greedy, and otherwise degenerate. Every person is completely free to decide to do this, and can therefore exercise their right to do so at any time, and put it into practice.
Unfortunately, our early ancestors also thought and acted wrongly in this way, which resulted in many millions of years of repeated acts of war before the ancient teachings of Nacademion could finally be spread far and wide in our galaxy, albeit very slowly and taught extremely sparsely. Consequently, it took millions of years before that mysterious sphere appeared, whose vibrations changed everything for the better and led to true peace more than 52,000 years ago, which has embraced us Irans with the entire Federation ever since.
The early ancestors of the Arans were fiercely warlike, and were by no means peaceful, as F. Seth, your grandfather, told me. They also did not know Nacademion's teachings, just as they later turned away from them for many millennia, worshipped their leaders and idealized them, and if I want to be precise, in an earth-human sense, they were called omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent, omniscient, demonic, powerful, and predestined. They were, so to speak, admired, glorified, glorified and worshipped in the same way that earth people practice faith in a god, but did not have no or worship faith in one. There was therefore no belief in or worship of a god among these peoples, as is the case with religions and sects on earth, since in early times various faraway travelers were regarded and elevated as gods, and gods because of their foreignness, their technology, and their ability, mastery, and knowledge. However, they were only named in this way when advanced earth people became experts in signs, symbols, and ultimately writing, whose first names for those who had traveled further afield in earthly realms were Elis, Ezer, and Essos. Also Osis, Avami, and Hor, etc., as well as Ink, Itzah, Cha, Sev, Ebiz, and Tosfer, etc., which is what is presently in my mind with regard to what has been fathomed. In the course of thousands of years, all the terms were linguistically changed in the most diverse cultures, so that they became new names that are known today, as we have discovered. The first names very quickly found their way into other languages of the most diverse cultures, and thus underwent linguistic changes.
But what happened with our earliest ancestors was that warlike peoples became established on Era and in our entire system for a very long time, resulting in hostilities that lasted for millions of years and repeatedly triggered wars. But in a nutshell, more than 52,000 years ago, true peace came about, triggered and realized by a mysterious giant sphere that appeared, which over time changed everything from hostile and warlike to good, positive, and peaceful. Many millions of war-obsessed people were stimulated by the mysterious vibrations emanating from the sphere to change their minds to a different and peaceful one, as a result of which the malicious obsession with war gradually receded in the majority of those affected, while very many threw themselves out of life by committing suicide because they were obviously unable to cope with the change in their minds. In any case, I will only briefly continue. It turned out that the sphere traveled from one planet to another through our system, as it did from system to system and from planet to planet through the whole area of, according to earthly terms, around 1,300 light years, where all those worlds inhabited by human forms, which were in constant contact with each other through their peoples, were visited by the sphere. It then disappeared as mysteriously as it had first appeared. In this way, through the vibrations of the sphere, it was triggered that the peoples pacified themselves by turning to the ancient traditional teachings of Nacademion and finally united to form the Federation, whose headquarters are with us on Era, and in a lively change of the 1 Po in T5 million strong body, through which everything important of the entire Federation is guided, which covers 1,300 light years in our cosmos.
I know that, because Svath has already explained everything to me, and later Simyase and Tatu, so I'm really orientated. This also applies to the sphere, whose vibrations triggered the process of people's rethinking and their transformation, which finally led to the penetration of the Nocademion teachings and the establishment of true peace and the Federation. Just as despite much research neither the origin nor the place where the object disappeared to could be found. And with regard to the huge committee pyramid, I know this monumental work because I was already there with your grandfather. So I know where the entire committee manages everything together in the same huge room. The Earthlings probably cannot imagine anything like it, and it will also seem impossible to them that such a huge pyramid could be built by humans at all. I have never seen anything anywhere that was even close to the same size, because something like this built by humans probably only exists on Era.
In that regard, I am not aware of anything similar elsewhere either.
Exactly. But look here, this is from Blarim. I have already told you about him before in connection with the pathologically vindictive, who got together with my ex and Methuselah and produced a work of lies of the worst kind. So Blarim has written the following, which I do not think I want to withhold from you. You can read it yourself here, because it is much easier for you than if I have to read it out.
Quetzal reads forwarded from Blarim. Subject: Overpopulation and Consciousness, Earth and Era in Comparison. Date: the 12th of October 2025 at 11:04 and 34 seconds Central European Summer Time. Consciousness, Love and Responsibility, Thoughts on Overpopulation on Earth and Balance on Era by Blarim.
I have learnt through Billy's writings that true love, consciousness and responsibility are the cornerstones of all creative development. In this sense, overpopulation is not just an external problem, but an internal reflection of our spiritual immaturity. These thoughts should be understood as a small contribution to reflection, in the knowledge that every person can contribute to the balance on our planet through their thoughts, feelings and actions. I would like to thank all Figu friends for their work in the spirit of the teachings and wish you health, strength and joy on your mission. Overpopulation on Earth is the biggest problem facing humanity today. It destroys the natural foundations of life, brings suffering to millions of people and animals and jeopardizes the balance of the planet. But the real causes lie deeper, within the humans themselves. Sexuality is not wrong in itself. It is a creative and natural force through which life continues and joy, closeness and connection can be experienced. But for thousands of years, humans have misunderstood this power and turned it into a drive that no longer serves consciousness but desire. As a result, sexuality has become a means of lust, power, and a substitute for true love and feeling. At the same time, religions have distorted the natural order of sexuality. Through their false teachings about sin, guilt, and divine will, they have led people into a contradictory way of thinking. On the one hand, repression and guilt, and on the other, unrestrained degeneracy. In particular, the religious demand for fertility and the denial of responsible birth control have contributed significantly to overpopulation. The truth is that creation does not demand countless offspring, but consciously lived life. Every human being is called upon to decide responsibly whether and when a new life should be brought forth, and only if he or she is mature and capable of bearing a child in love, awareness and care. In this way, sexuality becomes a form of expression of creative energy and the nurturing of interpersonal relationships, not the cause of need and destruction. Overpopulation is therefore a reflection of the inner state of humanity. Only when people learn to consciously direct their thoughts, feelings and instincts will it be possible to restore balance on Earth. No overpopulation problem on Error according to what is known from Billy's reports about the Pieran. The human beings on Error have not had an overpopulation problem for a very long time. The problem was recognized hundreds of thousands of years ago and solved with complete common sense. Today, a stable, consciously regulated population of around 500 million humans lives on Error, on a planet that is around 10% larger than Earth. This means that they live 20 times less densely than we do, in harmonious, nature-loving settlements, with full respect for the environment and resources. Conscious birth control. The Pleiadians practice a conscious birth control system that is free, sensible, and in keeping with creation, without coercion, but with responsibility. Each woman is only allowed to have 2 children per lifetime, and there is a minimum interval of 70 to 80 years between births, as the Pleiadians live to be over 1,000 years old. New births are controlled by authorization from the Population Council to maintain balance. The decision is not based on power or the state, but on consciousness, logic, and the order of creation. The Pleiadians do not regard this regulation as an encroachment on freedom, but as a necessary self-responsibility, because every life in creation is associated with co-responsibility for all other life. Sexuality on Error, sexuality is lived consciously, joyfully and naturally, not religiously, and not libidinally. It is an expression of the bond between 2 human beings, not just lust. There are no religious prohibitions or concepts of sin. Young people are educated early and naturally about the body, feelings, and consciousness. Sexuality is part of the joy of life, but is never mixed with irresponsibility or abuse. There is no prostitution, no pornography, and no sexualization by the media. People know that sexuality is creative energy. It should be nurtured, but not wasted or abused. Awareness and education. The most important element is self-education. From an early age, children learn to respect their own bodies, to understand their feelings, to take responsibility for reproduction, to recognize and understand that life is part of creation and not simply the property of man, and that it should therefore be lived with understanding, reason, evolutionary learning, and in awareness of all responsibility in a positive way. This means that there are no instinctual aberrations or social extremes. There are no unwanted pregnancies, no overpopulation, and no social hardship, because man's thoughts and actions are consciously guided by him in accordance with the law and creation.
Comparison, the population of Era is about 500 million.
Stable. In contrast, Earth's population exceeds 9.6 billion.
Constantly growing, uncontrollably, without regulation. No voluntary conscious birth control, nor any global oversight or motivation for people to follow the laws of creation or take responsibility for self-control of impulses and selfishness. Earthlings are unaware of the responsibility in using their sexuality, which is not naturally joyful, but is tabooed, or, on the other hand, irresponsibly exploited commercially, leading to sexuality being misused for materialism, abusing power and lust, while the goal of joyful harmony with nature and creation, energy should illuminate life instead of being perverted and wickedly desecrated.
Best wishes, and Salmi Blairam.
These are pleasing realizations and words, whereby all shall continue to bear good fruit and bring success. But now, Edward, my friend, I have to go, because I still have my duties to fulfill.
I do not want to hold you back. But what about the fact that the committee?
We will have to talk about that when I come back tomorrow. It is getting too late for that now. Well then, goodbye, Edward, my friend.
Take care then. Goodbye.
Sprinkles from the Correspondence 15 by Bernadette Brand.
Sometimes I am confronted with questions outside of the mail correspondence that I think could be of general interest, because they certainly concern more than just one person. In particular, questions arise regarding the newer uses of terms in the creation energy theory, because the seemingly different terms used by Billy, which are often code-related, are interpreted or understood too narrowly or too one-sidedly. One such question concerns the terms relating to the creation energy and physical blocks of consciousness.
Question: are the creation energy total block of consciousness and the physical personality total block of consciousness the same factors, previously called block of consciousness and total block of consciousness?
Answer: the apparently new terms creation energy consciousness total block and physical personality total block used in the revised creation energy teaching letter number 123 are code-related and denote exactly the same thing that in other Billy teachings books, brochures, articles, etc. Also code-related is called consciousness block or total consciousness block in the physical world. The spelling with S, for example consciousness block, denotes the physical realm, while the spelling without S, for example consciousness block, denotes the creation energetic realm. Both areas, the creation energetic as well as the physical, have a consciousness or a conscious consciousness, whereby both areas also have an unconscious in the creation energetic, as well as a subconscious in the physical. It remains to be seen what these two areas are called, whether consciousness total block, total consciousness block, or creation energetic consciousness total block, or physical personality total block, consciousness block, or physical personality total block, because they always denote the same functions in the creation energetic and physical/material areas of life and vibration. The difference between the creation energetic and the physical block of consciousness lies in the fact that the entire physical block of consciousness or personality is first activated by the life energy of creation and must be built up, expanded and nurtured by the respective person. impulsively already in the womb, gradually and consciously after birth. The conscious mind is able to absorb and analyze impulses from the physical subconscious or to use them as a working basis, whereby these impulses cannot be consciously called up, but rise up from the physical subconscious as required, and suddenly make themselves felt in the conscious thinking of the person, who is then free to decide whether he wants to pay attention to these impulses, take them up and work them out, or whether he simply ignores them and passes them over or pushes them aside. However, the physical subconscious not only acts as a source of impulses for the conscious mind, but also as a storehouse and as a medium for transmitting knowledge to the sensor, which filters out the purely positive values from the acquired knowledge of the conscious mind and passes them on to the creation energetic overall block of consciousness. A person's consciousness is not able to specifically release impulses or knowledge from their physical subconscious, as this only releases its impulses when the person's consciousness is also able to perceive these impulses and utilize them. Whether this happens in a positive way by taking up and evaluating the impulses, or in a negative way by ignoring or rejecting them is not decisive, but depends on how the person has built up and developed his physical personality, and whether or not he has created an interest in learning and developing further in his thinking. In addition, the physical block of consciousness dissolves irrevocably when a person passes away and simply fades away. If, on the other hand, we look at the creation energetic block of consciousness, or the overall creation energetic block of consciousness, then this also consists of a creation energetic consciousness and a creation energetic unconscious, which, however, does not have the same function as the physical unconscious. The creation energetic unconscious is the storage block or archive in which the positive or evolutionary knowledge of all previously lived existences that have ever been individually enlivened by the creation life energy is stored. The creation energetic block of consciousness always remains the same. It simply continues to develop by increasing in knowledge and strength, and growing evolutionarily through the positive impulses of countless physical existences, and their overall physical personality block, through which the knowledge is acquired and built up in the physical/material realm, and then passed on to the creation energetic block of consciousness. The creation energetic consciousness can access the knowledge stored in the creation energetic unconscious at any time and retrieve information and impulses from the unconscious knowledge store, and then consciously process them. Just as with the positive knowledge impulses from the physical subconscious that reach the sensor, which then forwards these impulses to the creation energetic unconscious. The creation energetic consciousness in turn generates positive impulses that are then passed on by the sensor to the psychic/material subconscious, which then allows these impulses to rise in the physical consciousness at the appropriate time, so to speak, where the person can recognize them, absorb them, and then decide whether to evaluate them positively or simply pass them over.